I'm here today with the travel photography guru, one of our fantastic masters in the Arcanum, Glenn Guy. A photographer and educator with 30 years experience in the industry, he shoots everything from landscapes to cemeteries and people to the icy cold of Antarctica. When he's not leaping tall icebergs in a single bound, he's passing on his knowledge to keen photographers like myself through his website, workshops in the Arcanum, and he's about to launch a new podcast. You can find him over at travelphotographyguru.com. Don't worry, I'll add the link to the description. Or right here, right now, answering 500 questions with me, Tiff Gilleland. Due to technical difficulties causing me to sound like R2-D2, I've ended up on the cutting room floor for this interview, but Glenn came through loud and clear, and I hope you enjoy the proceedings.
Oh, well, I think really I responded to a post that Trey put out through his very popular site, Stuck in Customs. And it was, it was literally just a post saying we've got this this thing called the Arcanum, and if anyone's interested in joining as an apprentice or joining up as a master, let us know. And that's what I did. So I kind of saw it as a bit of an application. One of the problems we have as teachers in the more sort of traditional environment is that we can't control the people in the group. And it's not about us. It's about us trying to find the right mix of people that will work together. And yeah, you just don't have that outside the Arcanum, and it's very difficult because you'll get people who just aren't appropriate for the group, or maybe have completely different expectations other than what was advertised, etc., etc. Because we've got this opportunity effectively of interviewing people by looking at their profile, I think we're fairly successful in being able to identify the right people for our particular cohorts. And because we have so many different masters, we're going to be able to cater to pretty much anyone, but it's got to be that right mix, isn't it? The right master for the right apprentices. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's why it's really important that folks give us all the information that we ask for, and don't just put a one-line answer. Really expand on it, and tell us about yourself and what your ambitions are and what your experience is, what you're hoping to learn, what your interests are, and by all means you should have a presence on the internet. So we give you the opportunity to put your various profiles in, your LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. Just make sure, for goodness sake, they work, because probably there are tutors out there, masters out there who are looking at potentially hundreds of applicants to choose one. And if they just see that those links aren't working, they'll just likely move straight on. So you do need to be professional about the way you put it together as well, I think. And so for those folks, Tiff, who are patiently waiting, I know you'd agree with me that we would want those folks to come back in and update their profile, freshen it up. Well, if it's a rainy day and folks can't get out to take pictures, or it's winter in their part of the world and they're waist deep in snow, they just go straight into the Grand Library and they target what they want. So you're dead right. It's nothing like YouTube at all. And also the videos are produced by folks who have a bit of an idea about what they're talking about, and often have some experience in teaching, and also in putting together quite well crafted videos. So it's a much better experience, much more highly targeted, and people will benefit without wasting their time, for sure. My parents were great travellers, so back in the mid-60s, so I think I was about 5 or 6, my folks went to India and Sri Lanka on a study tour with an organisation they were involved with. It was called CAA, or Community Aid Abroad. It morphed into what's called Oxfam now. And they went to see how folks real people in villages particularly were living, and to discover ways that maybe they could help them back home through a somewhat more affluent lifestyle. I mean, we just lived in a housing commission home, as a lot of folks of my generation did. We weren't rich, but it's a relative thing, and they actually dedicated a lot of their life to helping folks with less fortunate backgrounds than our own, and so I was really inspired by them. Certainly nothing like someone like Rick Salmon. He's been to many more countries than me. I have counted it, but I've forgotten. It's 20, 25, something like that. And, I mean, someone from Europe would think, nothing, because everything's so close there. But, from Australia, it's a bit more of an endeavour to travel overseas often. And also, a number of the countries I've been to, 3 or 4 times. So if I was out there to score numbers, I could probably be, 50 or 60, but it's somewhere in the 20s, I guess, yeah. Thank you. It's interesting because I've been in photography for 35 years in the industry, and yet I think the oldest of these images goes back to 2010 because there's so, I've got cupboards full of old negs and slides that I would really love to digitize and put out there, but it's a long-term project, so it doesn't really represent everything I've done, but it certainly represents where I am at the moment, I suppose. So this is an image from Antarctica. I co-ran a photography tour down there a few years ago, and it's a glorious place. The thing that I remember most about Antarctica is the grey-blue light, soft quality of light, but just that coldness in the light. It's kind of a bleak beauty. Very melancholy environment, I found it, and I like the mood melancholy. I think it's underrated. And now for something completely different. This is made in Nanjing Road, in Shanghai. So pretty glitzy part of the world. At just the foyer of the Peace Hotel, which is an amazing place. They have a jazz band in there who've been playing, I think since the 30s, and I think all of the members are 80 or older, and I've seen them a couple times over the years. So, they played jazz through the Cultural Revolution. It's quite extraordinary. And so this image really is exploring glitz, and it's exploring notions of beauty, and I think it'll be a nice contrast to some of the images that will follow soon after. But it's really also a design image, because what I do often is I've decided I want to photograph something, but it's like, well, gee whiz, maybe the light's not great, or it's not the right time of day, or I don't have the right lens, whatever. And then I challenge myself, and I call it making something out of nothing. So this is really an image about composition. So it's as much about this nautilus kind of shape, and then tying that in with the image behind it, trying to create a bit of tension and notions of frames within frames. So, that's kind of the approach to the photo. And then, a very different image. A lot of my people-based photography, I think, is about the human condition. And, a lot of my favourite images, both still photos and movies, deal with that notion. So this is a porter on Huangshan, or Yellow Mountain, in eastern China. So on the same mountain, I was there for 3 days tracking across the top. It's actually 7 mountain peaks linked together. And I approached it in a few different ways. So I was walking along paths a bit like that last one we noticed. And in this case, it's really more a shot, I suppose, about the environment and protection of the environment. So I'd call this a documentary photograph, which is just exploring that notion. And this I see more as a design image, or if you like, an image dealing with composition, because that's often how I approach my photos. Just they're based on composition. And yeah, this is just the notion of the the curve. That's really all it is, and clearly that's a part of the design of those classic bridges as well. And it's interesting because, you know, it looks like the colour's been stripped out of, you know, everything but yellow has been stripped out. In fact, that's pretty much what it was. There was virtually no colour in that environment except for these splashes of colour that would appear occasionally. And this one, again, it's compositionally based. So I've got an ebook coming early next year on my journey across this mountain. And the ebook is about a journey. You know, it's about sort of the spiritual journey that you go through out on your own in the landscape in fairly extreme weather. You know, it was like -20. But it's also about the journey as a photographer, because I started with just the straightforward pictorial photographs, and then I discovered a way to work with composition, because this is really just a compositional photograph again, looking at lines, looking at their relationship to each other and making triangles from lines, you know. And then the third thing I did was I ended up exploring the actual pathways itself. So, you know, that was kind of the process of putting together a body of work over a period of time. Here's more of that standard sort of documentary, and India's full of these opportunities, isn't it? There's just colour and life everywhere.
Yep, for sure. Love that green. It just it pops so nicely.
Yeah, it's so simple, isn't it? And that's the image just relies on that moment, and it's just about being there, having the camera ready, and being able to respond quickly and record the moment. It's very simple, but yeah, the green jug against his jacket. Without that, it wouldn't have worked. And this one to me is compositionally, it's about circles. So that's a printing press. This is the father's factory. That's the entire factory. The printing press and the fan actually bring out the circle shape in the child's head and face. So compositionally, that's what it was, and that old world feel of the traditional, you know, printing press where you've got to turn the big wheel to get it to work, because that turns the cog behind it, you know. That's why I went black and white, because colour would have just, we would have lost the sort of nostalgic feel, I think. And I think maybe from a portrait point of view, a good tip here is that I'm approaching this based on the notion of veranda lighting, because I'm actually on the edge of this little factory, if you like. It's just like a roller door that opens up and you step inside it. Outside it's, well, on the old scale, it's about 102 degrees. So, you know, around about 39 Celsius, I suppose. And stinking hot, really bright, horrible light. But just a couple steps into the shade, you have this glorious light. It looks like the light's getting in, but it's actually what we call open shade. And it's my favourite light for photographing people. And this is much the same. This is in a guy's little caravan, which was operating as a local store, I suppose. And it's very much about colour, contrasting the, I don't know, I'll call it marigold, but those sort of yellow oranges against the blue. Very simple, and using a shallow depth of field, you know, easy picture. But it relies on colour, doesn't it, and on that interaction with the subject. I do brand myself as a travel photographer because I love travel, and you know, it's what I do, what I love to do. But what is it to be a travel photographer? I think commercially it means photographing people in swimsuits by 5-star swimming pools. I'd find that to be soul-destroying personally. You know, clearly a lot of people, that's what they want to do. But for me, it's about recording the beauty of our natural world and sharing it with, and its people, and sharing it with an ever wider audience. That's what it's about. So I would actually see myself as a portrait photographer, a landscape photographer, and a little bit of an architectural photographer. In other words, I'm a generalist, but that's what you do in travel photography. You do a bit of everything. Yeah. So I do a lot of landscape work, and this is Bali, and you know, you've been an Aussie. You've probably been to Bali, Tiff.
I haven't actually, to be honest. I have not yet.
Well, I can recommend it. I think it's gorgeous. You just, of course, have to get out of Kuta, where all those horrible drunken Aussies go.
Yep.
and it's a very traditional country if you get up into the hills particularly, and it's lush, it's beautiful. So this is an example of that environment. Made in the same country, a portrait photograph, and I love this old lady, and I suffer through the same things that everyone else does when it comes to making pictures, self-doubt and all that stuff. I just don't let it bother me anymore. But I certainly experienced it, in my early days, and the breakthrough for me came when I realised that I was at least as exotic to them as they are to me. Because, look at me, I'm hilarious. And, you wander in, you're sweating, you've got all these cameras around your neck, and, you're tripping over, you feel like a fool, and the kids come up and laugh at you and want to play and poke faces and, all that stuff. And I actually think that we're bringing into their life something that they wouldn't otherwise be experiencing on that particular day. So it's never about putting a camera in someone's face. If people are worried about that, well, of course they shouldn't do it. But I'm all about forming a relationship, even if it only takes seconds, and then communicating that relationship out to a larger audience, and again, showing some of the beauty of the world and the human spirit, with, if you like, Middle America, of which Australia's a part, Yeah. So, very, very simple image. And I think you can see here, she is at least as interested in me as I am in her. Oh, she was curious because, you put the camera up in front and they also see their reflection sometimes in the lens. But, they're probably thinking, wow, is that expensive? What is this technology? Rah, rah, rah. But, after the photo was made, I went up to shake her hand and she put a hand on my face, the way old people do. And, from her point of view, I'm like a baby, even though I'm in my early 50s. What she sees as smooth skin, that's always an interesting thing. So I love that relationship anyway. Yes, it's been a long-term desire of mine to do a podcast in a number of years. And, one thing after another, I just haven't got to do it, and mainly because I wanted to have the stability where I could do one ideally every week. And with travel and different work commitments and things like that, I just don't think I could have done it. And also, I put an enormous amount of time over the years into that website blog I run. So you can do everything and be a master of nothing. So I've really had to wait until I thought the time was right. But I'm just about to release the podcast, and it's got the nominal working title of just Travel Photography Guru, and it will be based on travel photography. Although, as I said before, travel photography encompasses so many different aspects of photography that, in a way, it'll be a general photography podcast. Because, I can show photos from Australia, but for someone in America, that'll be considered travel photography, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
But, it will definitely show images from many, many parts of the world that I've travelled to. I'll have interviews with lots of folks. There'll be tips and techniques, all the usual stuff, but I guess with my own personal approach and my own underlying philosophy to photography, that'll be part of it as well. It won't be a gear type thing, podcast. Frederick has got the TWIP one, This Week in Photography.
Yes.
That's just fantastic. And I wouldn't want to try to compete with something like that, nor is it actually my interest to do that sort of podcast. So I think the trick is you just got to find your own space and make sure it's one you're happy with, because it's a lot of work over a long period of time. And I can't wait. I'm really keen. So I've got a couple interviews already recorded, and actually I expect to be working in a way that supports the Arcanum too, because I'm so passionate about the Arcanum that I'll be interviewing apprentices, moderators, other masters from time to time.
Yeah. Okay.
I know I'm
Awesome.
not kind of doing what you're doing because I wouldn't want to. Yeah, well, I suppose we're just going to be making the cake bigger, aren't we? We're not going to be competing for our
No,
slice.
no competition at all. I don't mind at all. Yeah, as it is with these things for me, I had this idea and the guys didn't tell me no, and they don't know what I want to try and build it into. So at the moment, it's just ad hoc interviews, and yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think it's fantastic, and I'm really happy to be given the opportunity to chat to you and share my work and talk about the wonderful thing that is the Arcanum. But
yep,
that'll be a portion of uh, a number of my podcasts, I imagine, because it's
yep,
just something I'm heavily involved with. We'll be on iTunes and various other the usual places where folks go to find podcasts. But
yep,
I think initially probably the website blog will be the
yep,
first place to find out about it. So because once it's submitted, it can take a week or so before iTunes actually posts it.
yep,
So I think if they go to my website, which is travelphotographyguru.com,
yep.
there'll be links to it from there for sure.